Although, you know,
I
who the hell, who the hell's got an
welcome
opponent? Who the hell's got an
welcome to
opponent?
another edition of Newsmakers Journal of the Vaccine Year. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Wednesday, March 24th, and we are delighted to be joined this morning by Council Member Mike Jordan, who joins us from his plush City Hall office. Council Member, how are you doing this morning? Had another late meeting last night.
Doing good, Jerry. Thanks for having me. I mean, I'm wondering if that backdrop is just a backdrop and you're really in Miami Beach reporting from spring break live. No?
I wish. Maybe next year we'll get there. All right, I want to start in. We're a year into, take a step back a little bit. We're a year into the pandemic, obviously, and all of the economic problems that we've had. I'm interested in your assessment of where we are, both in the economy and downtown. You had this, one of the brokers from one of the big commercial real estate firms described downtown and State Street as a yard sale last week. You agree with that?
Did you say yard sale or guard sale?
No, he said yard sale.
Yard sale, yeah. I've also heard the phrase, it's disarrayed and that type of thing. And I'm, as always, agnostic about it is or it isn't. I think we've done a really, really good job at what we needed to do quickly to keep businesses open and functioning. The longer discussion on, which hopefully won't be a longer discussion, it will be a shorter discussion rather than a drawn out year and year and a half. But that discussion on what it's eventually going to look like permanently is just starting. And there are certainly improvements to be made over what you see out there. There's also roadblocks coming up with simple things like if you let a restaurant out into the street with 25 seats, and then when we open up inside and they've got 50 seats in there, there are 75 seats if they want to keep their parklet outside, or if we allow that option, might push them to have more bathrooms than they currently have. So there's building code issues coming along with that, as well as visual and aesthetic things. And I don't feel it's a yard sale. I don't feel it's in disarray. I think it's indicative of having probably lived through the worst year. Well, your worst year in my life might have been the worst year in your life in terms of economic upheaval and loss of just our general community sense for a year due to COVID. And I think, you know, putting words on it now as we're starting to see the end of the tunnel and some sunlight coming is probably a little premature, but it is obviously a work in progress.
One of the questions that was raised was, you know, you opened up 9 blocks, or you closed to traffic 9 blocks of it. Is that too much?
My personal opinion, which is just one person, and there's going to be like 15 people discussing this on this, whatever the name of that long committee is, the Downtown State Street Area Subcommittee.
Are you vying to get at the head of the line?
Oh, of course I will. Why not? But my personal opinion is there's probably 2 segments split by another segment, where the 2 segments closer to the top and closer to the bottom will probably merit staying closed. And there's a much more a segment in town of 3 or 4 blocks and the quarter in the center where there's not the presence on the street of food and beverage operations, and it just may not make sense to keep that shut down. So it's way too long as anything. It's way too long as a food and beverage section. It's way too long as a cultural arts section. It's way too long as a retail section. We already know that. It's going to change whether we like it or not in the future. And I suspect that when we get down and start looking at how we want those changes to look or what the community wants them to be, I imagine the closed down part, the promenade part, is not going to be the entire 12 or 13 blocks, whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, I would say if there was one winner in all this, it would be Rob Dayton and the hordes of bicycle advocates who have pretty much taken over everything. I always thought it was supposed to be a pedestrian promenade. I didn't realize it was going to be a bicycle promenade, but now we
So,
got the green painting and the e-bikes and all kinds of stuff. Well, how did that happen?
so still a work in progress. And I'm sure people are glad there's not a little receptacle out there with sticks for me to use, right? And the spokes of tires. But I think it's still an experiment. It's a work in progress. I don't know that there's a clear answer to keeping bikes on State Street or not keeping bikes on State Street. Again, say what you want about Rob Dayton. If there was a hero in the or heroes in the city bureaucracy over the last year, and to me personally, it's Rob Dayton and Paul Casey. They have made the decisions quickly. They have been flexible. They've risen to what they need to do to make things happen rather than let them get dragged down in a discussion after discussion after discussion. And doing that, they've saved jobs, they've saved businesses, they've kept people interested in coming downtown, even when it wasn't good to come down, or it was a little better to come down, or eventually, I believe, when it is good to come down. I think both of them have done a really good job under probably the most trying situation in their professional lives.
All right. We still have something like 50 vacant storefronts.
Yep, that's the number I heard last week too.
Yeah. What's your assessment for small business now? Is there going to be enough federal relief money, other kinds of things coming in? What's your analysis of where we are?
Well, I think there's never enough, obviously, and I think we're going. The caveat is I know nothing about what I'm talking about when I'm talking about commercial real estate. It's just not really anything I'm conversant in. But I think what you're seeing is the eventuality of the erosion of retail, the economic hit of COVID, and it's getting to a point where I think you're going to see landlords lower rates, become much more flexible with who they're looking for. And that's something that's been overdue on downtown State Street, obviously, for several years. And I think the market will take care of itself.
All right. So we had this LA Magazine piece came out, I guess, about 2 weeks ago, and been a lot of discussion about that and so on. It really painted a picture of corruption at City Hall, particularly as relating to the cannabis retail issue, but also very critical of Paul Casey, who you just mentioned. What was your takeaway on that piece? And do you think any changes need to be made as a result?
So I wasn't on the council when that ordinance was put into place. I was on the planning commission and played a direct role in the placement of the 3 medical dispensaries, but not by the time they got to the retail ones, that was at council level. And I guess what my takeaway on that is, it's kind of just interesting that 3 years, 4 years later, nobody knew actually what the ordinance said. And so, I mean, in the public, okay, or in the social media, nobody knew what the ordinance said. So the ordinance specifically allows the business to be sold if there's a change of 51% or more of the stock of the corporation. It's clearly in the ordinance. It does have a preamble that says you can't flip it unless, and then it goes on to tell you what the 2 situations, or 2 or 3 situations, depending upon whether it's an individual, an LLC, or a corporation. So I'm kind of taken back a little bit that people jumped to that conclusion not knowing that that was possible. And I think that was done on purpose to recognize just inherently that's the kind of system we work in, that you build or start a business, you build it up, and eventually you might want to sell it. I think the fly in the ointment here is it happened immediately. It was speculative.
There was no business.
Right. But I'll give you 2 analogies on if you think it should change on just thinking about. So the city plays a role in awarding liquor licenses. And so say a former council member down the street might have gotten into a cafe 30 or 40 years ago and paid $50,000 for his liquor license. And the city approves that, plays a role in approving that. They manage the number and the placement of those. So now it's worth $500,000 when he's ready to retire. Should the city get a cut of that? Or should the city prohibit that? Same analogy I would use with the city paints some blocks on a map to do the AUD program and upzones them to a higher density, even though across the street they're left in their same density from that. So we play a role in designating where and how, and that vacant lot that was worth nothing a week before the ordinance is enacted is now worth 10 or 50 times more than that. Should a city get a part of that transaction? All those, I believe, kind of fall in the same category as what happened with the flipping of the cannabis licensee. Is that you go out, you take the chances, you invest your money, you qualify, you get your licensee or you make your business, and if you want to sell it, go ahead and sell it. The ordinance also makes that buyer go through the same exact vetting process, both from a qualification standpoint and from a criminal background standpoint, as the original buyer had to too.
So you don't have, of course, the fatal flaw in your analogy is that there never was any business that was set up. I mean,
correct. Well, and the other fatal flaw, two fatal flaws is there's only 3 of them, and the word cannabis is involved. So I get that too. You know, I don't know. I think it's a discussion to have on whether to reopen the ordinance or not. The only kind of inkling I have of a change at this time, without hearing all the pros and cons, is maybe when you grant, there's a time period before you can flip it. So 5 years, pick a number. 10 years, I don't know, whatever the number is going to be, that it just isn't what it appeared to be, which was a purely speculative qualifier who turned it around in the market and sold it. So that'd be the only thing. The city council, I think, also, without really knowing what happened when they were talking about that, I think we're not part of that process on purpose, because I don't think you want 7 city council members being pressured, both pressured and being pressured with contributions on having a role in the decision of who qualifies or who is rated the best for 3 licensees for something like cannabis that is so inherently lucrative. So there's a reason it gets done at the staff level, and there's a reason when it changes hand that it's done at the staff level.
So you're comfortable that there wasn't any corruption involved in either the citing or the transfer of this lease and so on?
So far, 100%.
Yeah.
I'll be interested to see what the interim chief's investigation shows up, but I'm really anticipating that both you and Nick Welsh have answered the smoking gun question on that Micah Anderson name, and that was really the only unknown to me at the time.
Yeah. Well, I got to credit Nick with that one, but but just to clarify, you would be open to considering amending the ordinance in terms of either a time frame or some demonstration that there is in fact a business, or the possibility of a public benefit assigning to the city as a result of a transfer?
Well, I think all those are worth discussing. Really, the only one that today appeals to me is considering a time frame to hold on to it before you can flip it.
Okay.
So that one seems to me, you know, I don't want government sticking their finger into somebody's business and disincentivizing them from growing their business and then getting to a point where they decide the best thing for them to do is to sell it. But I recognize the inherent imbalance of whatever was spent by the original business owner versus whatever he made on that overnight, just a paper transfer. I recognize the imbalance that's there, and the way I see to resolve that right now would be potentially put a time limit for him to hold it before he can do so.
All right, fair enough. You recently were the only vote against the new project labor agreement system that the city set up, which is going to require, not to oversimplify, but of public works projects, city projects, $5 million and over, going to require that the hiring go through the union hall. And you made what I thought was a very important point, which is, has there been a problem with quality work that has been done by non-union contractors in this town? Many of them who've been here for decades or longer and put a lot into the community. What was your reason for voting against that?
That was one, but really I did lay out a path where I would support it. And that is right from the start of that, whether I'm talking to the Armstrongs and the Cushmans of the world, or if I'm talking to a local trade union. And my focus was on ensuring that there was a credible path and a result for local employees to participate, so that the Armstrongs and the Cushmans of the world didn't have these barriers to jump over that were unreasonable to bring their non-union employees into a union job, work the union job, and then get back out to go on with their regular lives. And the crux of that to me was what is the measurement of local employees on one of those jobs. So on a job that's more than 5 million and is a union controlled job. And we got bogged down in, I think, two different sections there where I think the labor unions wanted that number to be 25% of the crew would be local, and staff countered with, I want to say 60. Staff had originally started with 75%, but kudos to them. They had gone out and done some studies of those kind of jobs in the region and said, okay, so what we're actually seeing on the ground is that people can meet 60%, and that seems to be very common. And so that's where we were apart, 25 to 60. And I was the only one on council who continued to push for more local people on the job than not local. I think council eventually said 40%, but also took out the caveat that we'd actually get a report on that. So they took away the requirement to report out on what the results was, and they just put this number out there that we expect 40% of the workforce to be local. And that, to me, probably my breaking point was it had to be at least more than 50%, or else the benefit is obviously not for local employees.
Right, and I think another important point to make there is, what is the definition of local? Because I think when you're talking about it, you're talking about people who live in the city of Santa Barbara.
Right.
And from the perspective of those supporting the ordinance, it's tri-counties, Ventura,
Right.
SLO, and Santa Barbara.
So I believe it tiers up, but it gets quickly out of the city of Santa Barbara, and and then quickly gets through the South Coast, and then quickly gets to the tri-counties. And I actually would have been happy if it just was city of Santa Barbara priority, and then whatever you want to call the greater South Coast. So Carpinteria to Goleta, including the city. And if we would have said, that's your burden, and I would have been happy with trying to work out a way that said, if you can show us where you just can't get there, okay, we can deal with that too. But I think the assumption that that projects will do that without being held accountable is a false hope. And so I just couldn't vote for it. I could, literally, I really, if we could have gotten that question answered, I would have been grudgingly okay with it. I think obviously it was supported by the entire rest of the city council. So there wasn't really a role for me to play in that vote other than just be a fly in the ointment. But nobody really took to my concern of that local hire issue in a manner that the project would be held accountable.
Which ought to be the nut of it. I mean, it seems to me that the whole thing seemed to me to be a solution in search of a problem. I mean, I don't recall,
Well, if it is, I mean, I can grant you that, but we already pay the wages on those size projects, city projects. We pay prevailing wage, so
Sure.
We're already paying almost the equivalent of union wages anyhow. The rest of it is all union stuff, union participation, dues, use of their benefit programs, use of their retirement programs for the duration of that job. So I would say that, we do have a history here of that work being done at the same quality, by quality workmanships, longtime family owners in the region. And really, that was my concern, making sure that the workforce that's here, that's been building the Moxies or the Arlington apartments or whatever else, I mean, whatever. I'd hesitate to say cottage because then somebody will tell me how many people are coming from out of town for cottage, but projects like that Armstrong chases or Cushman chases or whoever else chases, that there's a valid avenue for them to participate, and that we expect the project to allow them to participate, and we have some way of measuring that. I mean, I could have gotten to a yes with that, but that was just a fatal flaw for me.
All right, let me go back to something you mentioned on the cannabis thing, saying there's a reason that the council is insulated from that.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the candidates running for mayor, Deborah Schwartz, is proposing a stronger mayor or a stronger council form of government. And I think specifically talking about giving council more authority or the power to hire a greater number of department heads and so on. Do you think that's a good idea?
I am just not conversant enough in what that looks like somewhere else versus what it looks like here and what the pros and cons are. Again, I think you've heard this from me before. I am extremely happy with our executive team and our department managers in my year of actually sitting here with them in this chair. And I've had nothing but good success with them for the 10 years prior to that as a planning commissioner. So I'm not sure what that is there that would be better than this. Particularly, and particularly when it might work one time when you have a strong, intelligent mayor and 6 other strong, intelligent council members. But what happens when you don't? There's between the city attorney and the city administrator, there's like more than $500,000 there of personnel resources and lifetime of experience managing the city on a day-to-day basis. Now, do I have the ability to do anything other than kind of stay on the periphery and kind of say, here's my opinion, and help point the ship a little bit when I think they're too much inside baseball to see what I see going out in the community? I think that's my role, and I like that. Sorry, I have a little gnat chasing me here, but I think that's my role, and I appreciate their level of expertise and their knowledge and their history of working in this environment. And I would personally feel uncomfortable about being told that I know what I'm doing and hiring any one of 12 department heads or directly hiring a police chief. I think you're talking about a whole level of expertise for a mayor or council member. And I'd question, how do you control that quality product when it's just people electing you based on a personality contest?
So in terms of one of the sort of tangential issues that was raised by the magazine piece we were talking about, you don't feel that Paul Casey's overpaid?
I think he's paid a good amount of money that is eye-popping at times. But if you look anywhere else in the state for an equivalent city or muni, you will find that that's the going rate. And if you're willing, if you want to put your foot down and draw a line on the sand and say we should be paying less, then my response would be, you're going to get what you pay for. You're going to get less talent. You're going to get less ability, less history, and less knowledge bringing with that person. So it's a big amount of money. But then again, this is not. It's who do I want to who do I want to make fun of today? This is not Fresno or Bakersfield. This is Santa Barbara. We expect a ton out of our employees, from the hourly employee as you're driving out of the parking lot, all the way up to our executive team and department managers. We expect a ton out of them. And I don't think the common person on the street really knows what that means. In many of the cases for the 12 department managers and then the 2 executive team members, it's a 24/7, literally a 24/7 job, all day, all night, every night. And so it's easy to take a shot at it. They're humbling numbers when you look at them, but you're just looking at the numbers, and I don't think you're looking at the job these people do.
Is it just coincidence that we have all these vacancies among department heads right now, community development, the police chief, the fire chief, and so on? Or is there something about what's been going on with the city that is responsible for that?
Well, I doubt it's the second one, and I can run through them real quick because I saw Mr. St. George's interview last week where he lambasted the vacancies, which is kind of ironic because he played a direct role in 2 of them, the community development director and the chief building official. So, he's eating the cake from both sides and not just taking a piece out of it. You can't publicly lambast the city for the people you have in those roles, and then when the city actually responds, then lambast the city for having a vacancy there while you're recruiting. I mean, that's pretty unreasonable in my book. So Lori Luneau came, committed to 5 years, and she had passed her 5 years by several months. She did her time. She was ready to go. So that's not coincidental to me. The fire chief, personal issues of a magnitude in his family that are just horrible to imagine happening to any family. And so coincidence, I guess you would call that happened during the same time. And the others are just natural attrition. So Rebecca Bjork has taken, again, an Ed St. George a contradiction that we never move people internally. We always go somewhere else. So Rebecca Bjork has moved from Public Works Director up to a vacant administrative position in City Hall. Yesterday, I think the media release went out. We have hired internally for a new chief building official. And it is Tina somebody, but whose last name I forget, maybe Tina Dye, D-Y-E, can't quite remember. Longtime city employee, been building official in other cities. So I think certainly not what I signed up for, to see almost half of the department heads go vacant in the first year, but the ones that left for a reason unrelated to anything going on at the city. And there's only one situation, I think, with the finance director where that was one that really our hands were tied from a legal standpoint, and it was more time to go.
Yeah. Going back to your commentary about the stronger council versus the weaker council, does that your contentment with the status quo, as it were, does that mean you won't be supporting Deborah Schwartz for mayor?
I am not endorsing anybody for mayor yet.
Really?
So,
you kind of snuck that in.
No, I'm doing the Mr. Eric Friedman thing. So obviously Kathy is working on me. I think that was her phrase with you. So she continues to work on me. I obviously know Deborah well. We served the same track terms on the planning commission. So I was on 10 years of the planning commission with her. I have not spoke with James Joyce. I will speak with James Joyce, and I have not heard from Randy Rouse. So I guess kind of on paper, Deborah might have hinted at it, but I think really the only one that's come out and asked me so far is Mayor Murillo. But I'm waiting. I'm waiting to do my due diligence and make a decision. I think it's way too early at this point in time. There's plenty of fun to come, so to speak, and And I expect that I will have an opinion at some time before the election.
But I mean, you've served with the mayor. So, I mean, what else is there for you to learn about whether she deserves reelection or not?
Only a year. I mean, only a year, but I've known her for a long time. I've known her for 10+ years too. In fact, all the way back to when I was on the Creeks Advisory Committee in the early or mid 90s. But to me, it's kind of a two-pronged thing. And neither of these are in a particular order, but one is who's the best person to work with me? Okay, that is certainly half of the equation, is who helps me in my role from their role. And I don't have a sense of that with any of them yet. And as to who's the best one is, I mean, I have a sense of where Kathy is with that, but I don't really have a sense yet of where the other 3 or 4 would be better or worse than that. And then the other one is, it's kind of the same thing, but who would best fill the position for the community? And those are, and I have the same problem. To me, it's way too early to really vet that I'm not really sure when that will be, but I suspect, over the summer, before we get to forums, that kind of thing. I think, there's a very small inside baseball group even paying attention to who's running in November yet. I mean, it's not.
That would be my viewership. Okay, so don't
make me-
minimize them.
Don't make me make up a number. So.
All right, and I'm a little surprised that you haven't heard from Randy Rouse, although then I recall that you had that little set to about whether he was endorsing you or whether he was allowing the use of his name or something else.
Or supporting me, right? Support or endorse, right?
Yes.
And what do those mean? That was the discussion at that time. So I imagine I'll hear from him. I would be surprised if I didn't. And he would immediately fall into somebody that I've known for 15+ years, worked with on the board of downtown Santa Barbara, been a customer many times, have used many times as a sounding board for my consideration on planning commission. We chat on and off over the last year for council issues too. I just remind him he's grouchier than me and try and not fall off that log. But I would suspect I'm going to hear from him too.
Have you heard from Barrett Reed asking you to support him to run against Kristen Sneddon?
I will. I am in support of Barrett.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yes, I am. So, and for the reasons I talked about before, the same 2 reasons, I find Barrett very intelligent and conversant in ways that resonate with me on forward-looking, future generation presence in the city of Santa Barbara, but way better than me. He can balance that and talk about that in a manner that talks about what my children will be able to do and how they will live in Santa Barbara, and at the same time balance that with the protection of the cultural, historical, or the small town community type of thing. I'm very impressed with Barrett.
And you feel he would do that better than Ms. Sneddon?
It's particularly as it resonates with me. Yes.
Okay, fair enough. Mike Jordan, thanks so much. We always appreciate you dropping in and talking about city stuff with us and bringing us up to date on your views. And glad to hear you're going to get your second vaccine, and you're practically in Costa Rica now. So
tomorrow, and then hopefully the end of the year, right?
Yeah.
So, but I'll tell you how that works out. Getting in that little cigar tube of an airplane anytime near the end of the year just might be more than you want to do. So, yeah. But again, if we want to do a plug here at the end, I still see on social media that people are having trouble finding where, even though they're over 65. I have nothing bad to say about both the MyChart systems at Cottage and the MyChart system at Sansom. And I'm not really sure that the word's out that they're duplicate MyChart systems. And if you're a Sansom customer, you're automatically on it. But if you're not in the hospital, you're not on the MyChart thing at Cottage. And so I had a great experience with Cottage. Literally, I signed up on a Friday, got my authorization. They make you fill out a thing, and they send you an authorization. Got that back on a Monday, and then on that Thursday, I got my email for an appointment for Friday, Monday, or Tuesday. Literally, it happened that quick. And I was obviously already on Sansom, as I'm a Sansom customer, and my Sansom first one followed like 3 days later. So they were both tracking each other. And for the people that are having trouble, I just encourage you to get on those systems. And if you're an old codger like Jerry Roberts and you need your caregiver to help you use a computer, then find somebody that can help you, that's conversant in that online stuff, and have them help you do it. I drove through it out at Cottage Goleta, and as I will tomorrow, and it's like there's a 15-minute waiting period, and I think the total thing took 25 minutes.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's
No,
just
I absolutely second the motion on that one, because they're just they've done a great job, and I had the same experience out in.
and I don't really, you should. I know you haven't left the house in like 3 years, but
No.
you should find a way to really do a story on that with somebody. I think the number they gave, while I'm sitting there for 15 minutes, I'm talking to a respiratory MD, who's the holding person for us. They have I think there's 110 volunteers every time they're open. Yeah. And you do half of that time. So some days, or all the time, but some days there's more than that because some come and go. But so you just figure how many days they've been doing that, or how many days they're going to continue doing that through summer, let's say, into fall. And the number of not only the doctors, nurses, and medical professionals, medical workers helping out there too, but the number of volunteers over that period of time is just a staggering number of community involvement for the better of the community. And I don't, I have no idea how to say thank you to that, other than to say thank you somewhere here, but it's certainly not enough. There's just so many people to thank in this process, and so little time to complain about how poorly it's been managed, because of the amount of people that are giving of their time and their lives to make sure that we all get vaccinated. So
yeah. Well, I've been trying to get somebody who gets paid for reporting for a living to do a story like that, and I'll keep working on it. All right, thanks again, Mike. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, always, Jerry.
Bye-bye.